Welcome to People, Real Stories podcast. I'm Rena, your host, and today I'm presenting you another real life story. My guest is David Deigthon. David is an artist, educator, father, world traveler, who creates transformational experiences using abstract art. His journey includes running a successful art business, engaging strangers in public spaces to bridge divides, and traveling to over 80 countries. He has also made a life in the remote mountains of New Mexico, living off-grid. In this episode, we talk about David's life story, the personal experiences that shaped him, and the journeys that led him to connect art, community, and humanity in unexpected ways. Hello, David.
Hello, nice to be here.
Nice.
What an introduction. I feel great.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Well, I have first question. Can you take us back to your early years and share how your journey into art and creativity began?
That's always a difficult question, as to find like a specific place and spot where this happens. But my life has been between the United States and France. I grew up in France, and I'm now living in the high desert of the United States in New Mexico. So I've always been between the two countries, and mostly comfortable, shall we say, in an airport waiting lounge, waiting for an airplane or waiting for a bus or being on a bus or on a trip going somewhere. I'm in constant movement, and I find that to be my home, if you like. And in that space, I've explored things on the periphery. So things that you see kind of on the side of your eye, not the things that are straight in front of you. And that's where my artistic exploration and perception is, on these peripheral areas. And it brings me to unusual places and kind of thinking out of the box and coming up with new ideas that I use in abstract art projects and conceptual art pieces. But really from a very young age, I was told you cannot make a living as an artist. So unfortunately, I went in different directions than art, but I was always producing. And for the last 25 years, I'm in my 50s. So half my life I've been in producing artwork and making a living from it, but not at the beginning. I guess I didn't have the courage or the know-how or the exposure to know that you could make a living as an artist. I hope that answers it.
Your answer created more questions.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes. So let's circle back to when you mentioned France.
Mm-hmm.
You were born in France. I might assume that the creativity of France might inspire you also to pursue the artistic side of yourself. But how was life like when you moved out, or you always lived between two countries? Or there were some period in your youth when you lived in France for a certain amount of years uninterrupted?
Well, when I was going to high school, in secondary school, I was in one place. I was growing up in Paris, and there was the art galleries, and I enjoyed going to the openings of art galleries, not just for the free wine, and also for the nice companionship and exploring new horizons. But I like to travel. So when I was 17, I went to Eastern Europe, to Czechoslovakia, and to Romania and Hungary over the summer to see how things were in Eastern Europe when they were still social democracies, communist countries, if you like. And that opened my eyes as to the narratives, to the stories that are presented to us. It was different than the one I could hear on American radio, such as on the propaganda channel of Voice of America. And it was different from the ones that I heard from the Soviet propaganda channels of Radio TASS that you could easily listen to on Parisian radio stations. And so I wanted to go see for myself. And that brought a real fascination as to walls, barriers, borders, the things that divide us, and how do we connect beyond those borders. Not just physically, more maybe in an intellectual manner. For example, if we have very different ideologies, if we have very different political positions, how do we bridge between those two? How is that done? And that's been at the core of my artistic journey, is finding ways to explore, let's say, our echo chambers. Do we have an echo? Do we live in an echo chamber? Our point of views, our worldviews, what do they look like? And how does one person enter the echo chamber of another person, and if it's even possible, and vice versa, and having these conversations that are uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but I find necessary to, in the spirit of democratic endeavors of learning about others and being non-confrontational without confrontation, is discovering, right? It's about traveling. You can also travel without distance. You can travel in the mind with others that have different points of view. Yeah, I think that's where it started. That was a great
That's
trip.
that's very interesting idea because a lot of people travel in the traditional way. You go from place to place, from country to country, but the travel from mind to mind, that's interesting
Mm.
concept. So thank you for sharing this. You mentioned also, although you discovered art, but you were told that from art you cannot make a living. I also heard this expression myself in my young age. So what did you study then, or did you went to university? Did you got higher education, and if yes, in which field then?
Well, I left France shortly after that trip to Eastern Europe. I thought, oh well, if I've this is what it looks like in the Eastern Bloc. Let's go to the Western Bloc. Let's go to the United States. I have a passport. Let's live over there. And I went to did some different jobs and found that I needed a higher education and went to university to study international relations with a focus on South American politics, and did that for a few years. So finished that, got my diploma, and found that no, I wasn't interested in that. I was still interested in art and expressions and exploring that space we were talking about before. So I just started traveling, doing odd jobs and traveling. And then one day at a coffee shop back in France, this time with a friend, he said, why don't you, I didn't really know what to do. He said, why don't you sell antiques in America? They'll buy anything. And so I started an antique business by bringing antique furniture and items from France and Europe back to the United States and selling them at antique markets and shows. And that brought me to I was fascinated by the maps. So there, my international relations came into order. I was fascinated by the antique maps from 200, 300 years ago, all the way to more recent maps, and sold tons of maps, fascinated by them. And all of the story around the printed matter. And I saw it through the eyes of propaganda by providing information. Even if you have a botanical print with a flower, it was a way of showing cultural knowledge and forms of political hierarchy from France versus England versus Germany. And so I did that for 17 years and started an antique business that turned into an art business that was focusing on artwork on paper. And the thing, I guess, is that I always saw life as a flow where you go with not what's easiest, but what feels best inside, not because of its ease, but because of how it resonates as to me, that it made me want to get up in the morning and do this. And you don't count the hours. You just want to experience it, and that's where it brought me. So from diploma in international relations, I actually got to use selling antiques through maps that went into art in all different forms, focusing on paper. And that's where I am today as an artist. A lot of my artwork is abstract artwork on paper. And then on the other side is conceptual artwork, where I go in person to meet strangers in free speech areas, which in national parks. I know that's, it's really complicated, but I go to places where people, I can meet strangers, a lot of different ideologies and political opinions. And there I try to find bridges and how we can communicate about the most sensitive of subjects in the United States right now, the one of politics. So I look for political opponents and we talk about politics non-confrontationally, without confrontation, which people think is impossible. So that's been doing that for the last 6 years. And that's been a marvelous part of my journey. I'm really enjoying that. And so that's the flow. That's the flow I'm in right now, is having this conversation with you as well. That's a good one. Not that you're my opponent in any way, but creating a bridge and communicating our ideas with one another. Or maybe it's a bit one-sided today. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
It's my story.
Yes, it's your story, so it's probably one-sided.
Yeah.
One side.
Although I do want to hear yours.
Well, that's very interesting what you just shared about your other part of your life, how you created the antique business. And I need to ask because I'm really curious. You mentioned that for a period of time you sold a lot of maps from 200-300 years ago. I'm just question, where were you able to find so many maps?
I know.
That's what I'm trying to understand, like where the people are hiding and why they're still keeping them.
Right. So, that's what I loved about it is, first of all, it's paper. So how does it survive for 200 to 300 years? It's, there's floods, there's fires, they get thrown away, they get torn, there's insects, there's all these things that happen. People write on them, all these things can happen. But people have cherished them over time. They end up often in a folder with a lot of other papers that are then put into an attic. That has a good chance of survival when it's in somebody, when it's dry in somebody's house in the attic versus in the basement, which is humid and would deteriorate. And then somebody dies, and all these things, they end up on the street being sold at like an antique sale, and I would go from village to town with my wife, and we would look for folders and books, because there's atlases with old maps in them. They can be in frames sometimes, but that's not always the best place because they can be glued onto a board. I wanted just the piece of paper, and there's collectors, and there's people that collect them and then resell them, and you can exchange with other people that specialize in that market. And it was quite, there were a lot of collectors in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was very fashionable to show your wealth, to show your power on the wall of your heritage, where you came from, the places you've been, or where your business interests were a most expensive map or the most fantastical map showing California when they thought it was an island, or showing the early American colonies, and things like that. And so, I never stopped buying. Whenever I saw it, if the price was right, I kept on buying and studying maps and all the things around it as well. As I said, from engravings of botanicals to landscapes. And then that went into drawings. So original artwork with drawings and watercolors. And then that brought me into more modern pieces. So how about modern art and abstract pieces all the way to the present? And in the end, I just put in my own artwork as well for the contemporary pieces. We painted our own pieces and sold those, and still doing that today, actually. So it was, that was just go with what sells, of course, and what people want and what you're interested in, and explore and just do it. That was the big thing, not think about it too much, just try it out. And so I've been doing that. I think that's the one way of running a business is trying things out and experimenting.
It definitely is. I understand that you're not the only antique collector and seller in the world, but you were specific focused on the maps. And I'm like, where did he find so many maps?
Yeah, there's lots of markets out there. Summer, spring, when people bring things out, and
unbelievable.
There's a lot of things out there, and sometimes you find paper. So there's entire days where you find absolutely nothing, but there's often a piece or two. And unfortunately, we live in a digital age where there's less and less artwork on paper, and so those things are on the way out. So they're becoming more and more rare, and maybe people don't appreciate them as much as they did, apparently. But And I would sell everything. I haven't kept a single piece, but I can see pieces in museums from time to time, which are nice. I always, oh, there's a map. Let's go see the map. What is it?
Is there one of the maps that you sold someone? No?
Yes. Oh no, yeah. To that ended up in a museum. You mean, or
Yeah. No?
maybe because the buyers don't. If they're from an institution like a museum, they usually don't tell you where it's going. It's about the provenance. But the private collectors, yeah, would know where they would go. It's an interesting world where some things are kind of kept secret and you don't know where they go. But I've always been open about where I found things and the story behind the pieces I found. Um, and so people don't necessarily want to buy an expensive piece and then tell everyone where they live and where it's going to go.
Yes, that definitely is. I understand some collectors, they
Mm.
need their privacy. I know
Mm.
this, but I think it will be incredible chance that randomly in the museum you might see a map that you sold, I don't know, a few years back. Who knows? Like it can happen randomly. You just go in and bam, it's there.
Well, the thing is that these are, even if they're 300 or plus years old, they're printed. So there are multiples often. Well, sometimes there could be only one or two that survived, but they are multiples of them. So you'll see a similar map that's on display. And then I would recognize usually the elements of color, maybe repairs that were done to and specific years or details as to which borders have changed between one printing and the other. Um, yeah, it gets quite detailed, but each one has a story, and that's what I enjoyed, is the story behind it, and also knowing that document influenced migration, travel, business, and military affairs, and all those things. That was the most up-to-date information at the time, and that part fascinated me very much, as the artwork today that I do, talking to strangers on about politics, is just a small moment in time, kind of mapping that, if you like, and finding and creating bridges, which are like creating new lines to the interconnections of mankind, of humankind. So that's my abstract way of seeing things and the connections that go with it. Yeah, no, it was fun. I don't do it anymore, but I still enjoy looking at a good map from time to time, because I'm so much in today's project of talking to strangers and finding connections with people with different political opinions, especially in a time that's so divided here in the US and in France as well, and so many other places around the world. But those are the two places I mainly know. So mapping out that trajectory is the one. Yeah, that's where my flow is right now. The flow.
That sounds also interesting, but let's get back on the track.
Mm. Okay.
You also have been an educator.
Mm.
Can you shed a light how this happened, or I misunderstood something?
No, not at all. There's several ways in which I'm an educator. I'm a father. So for a decade, I was homeschooling my daughter as we were traveling around the world, and so I served as her teacher, and so did my wife. After that, decided to during COVID, they didn't have enough teachers. So I jumped in to become a substitute teacher. When teachers are absent, I go in. I don't necessarily teach what the subject's about. I keep to the subject of echo chambers. So we talk about, and that would be a whole other show, but the story of the cave, played from Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher. I'll teach that to the kids. They don't get classes in philosophy here in the United States. So at least they get that one. And then, of course, when I was selling artwork on paper, there was always an education that had to be done to explain to people what they were seeing in front of them. And now is one in, I teach about active listening with all your senses, to people can use for businesses and and as individuals, to have a better, deeper conversations with people. So that's part of, that's why I added educator, because that's a word that kind of covers a lot of the things I've done in the past and today. Yeah.
Definitely is. And again, you didn't study, just your path brought you to this.
Exactly. Spot on. Yes. Spot on. Yes. Life brought me to it. Mhm.
Great. Your journey also has taken you to over 80 countries. What motivated you to travel, or was there any specific reason behind it? You mentioned when you were 17, you wanted to see East Europe, you went to Hungary, to Czechoslovakia, all this, but then you traveled more. So, what was reason behind the later travel, the world travel?
Well, it's just a place I feel comfortable in. It's finding the commonality that there's often things we have in common from one country to the other, usually not about our own histories, but about the emotions that we feel, love, hate, anger, all those things, is to see how they're expressed in different countries. So I always found that interesting. And it allowed me to want to talk directly to people, to have, to find out what they're about, a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or going for a walk together. And I also like just to wander for walks that can last from the morning all the way till night. So, if I'm in Japan, that's not a problem. You can walk all the time, and there's a restaurant to go to and this to see. I returned a few weeks ago from Colombia. I would have my little backpack and I would walk from one village to the next and just go from village to village and get to discover the landscape and the people more intimately. And it's a great place to think as well for new ideas. And in a couple of weeks, I'm on my way to Morocco, and I'll be hiking in the desert. And there's a lot of abandoned villages there from an earthquake that happened a couple of years ago in the high Atlas Mountains. So I'll be going from village to village, going to discover the old rammed earth villages that have been abandoned and in ruins. And I did that 2 years ago. I'm going back to discover some more. So to wander and to walk and to talk with people, or try to at least, because language is often a barrier, is it not? Unless we look deeply into each other's eyes. And often there's that click, and that's all I need. We have a little connection, and that feels good.
So it's basically cultural travel. You learn about other cultures, countries, how people live, how they communicate, how they drink coffee, and so on.
Yeah. That's something we all kind of do. I'm not in a rush. I usually go to one place and just explore deeper and deeper into it. Because I feel like you can even travel in your own neighborhood and discover still new things. It's just talking to the person you haven't spoken to before, or discovering what they're about. There's often somebody on our very own city block that is from a different country, and they eat different foods. And there's something to discover always, and maybe the details versus then the big picture. Still from that periphery we started this conversation with, from the side, what appears kind of out of focus to the side of your eyes. I find that to be a very attractive space. Also one where you can hear, touch, feel, taste, use all of your senses versus your mind just racing along as you're going from one tourist attraction to the other. I like to bring it down a little bit and get to appreciate what's happening in front of me. Not to say that it can't be done when you're running from one place to the other, but that's too much for me.
I understand it, and everyone has different way of approaching traveling. Somebody is running from place to catch the bus or to manage to get into the museum on time, and somebody just enjoyed slowly walk and gazing in the other people's eyes if there is no language to communicate.
Yes.
Yes, I mean that's it. That's what makes you unique and what makes your story unique. Next question: how did you end up living off-grid in the remote mountains of New Mexico?
Oh well, that was a period in my life where I was living in Paris. We moved to the United States. I didn't want to live next to people. I didn't want to talk to people and have a cup of coffee with them. I wanted to be.
Although you travel to 80 countries, you don't want to talk to people.
Yeah, there was a period in my life that I didn't want to talk to people. I would just go walk in nature looking for quiet places. And at that time, it was several kilometers away from the next neighbor. on top of a mountain at 2,500 meters of altitude, snow, the big trees, no electricity, no water. It was an experience. It was hard, but it was immensely beautiful. Yes, did that. And I don't regret it one bit. I am enjoying more comfort these days. My wife still enjoys when she has a hot shower, how nice it is to be able to have a hot shower or to be able to do the laundry in a washing machine at home.
Yes, yes, I totally agree with your wife. So,
Oh, I enjoy it too. I enjoy it too. But we enjoyed better because we took it away from ourselves, and now we can better appreciate it today. The simple pleasures or simple commodities.
so the life in New Mexico of grit, it just was small phase of your life, like short
About
period.
6 years.
Wow,
6 years. But the more remote you are, the closer you get to your neighbors. So that was fantastic. I got very close to everybody, regardless of how they thought or what their beliefs were. They were just happy to have somebody to talk to and to have a neighbor that could help them get out of when they were stuck in the snow or in the mud. We could help each other out. So that was a fantastic discovery for me, is that the further removed I was from civilization, if you like, the closer I was to the few neighbors that we had within, 20 kilometers around from us. You got to know them well, and they got to know you. And we appreciated the importance of having each other to make life a bit easier when things are difficult. Yeah.
Human connection, real
Yes,
connection.
Yeah, back to human connection. Yes. Yeah, we got to communicate with one another in a digital age like today. That's one of my greatest fears, is that we're so disconnected that we're disconnected from our neighbors, from ourselves, from our larger community and country and world, while being immersed in some form of fantasy full of information that we might not really need, and forget the questions of the heart and the spirit. Yeah. Yeah, that's in my flow right now.
I can understand that. Before we finish, what's the one thing you'd like listeners to take away from today's conversation?
Oh, definitely to talk to a stranger, or talk to, try to rekindle and bridge to someone that you no longer are speaking to, and just actively listen without judging, trying not to judge, trying not to be triggered, to find something that you have in common. And it won't be a fact or an opinion. It would be an emotion that you share, and tell them that. That would be it. Take that step. It's painful at first, but it's very rewarding and transformational in the long run. So if you can this week, give it a go with one person. Maybe you already do, so do it with another.
Okay, that's quite interesting suggestion, and I think a lot of people might go out of their comfort zone doing this, but I think that's the purpose of this exercise, right? Well, David, thank you so much for being here, and for everyone else, thanks for listening to Real People Real Stories podcast. Join us next time for another inspiring story.
Thank you so much for having me on and letting me share.